everyone. Welcome back to the Bruin Political Union Podcast. I'm your host, Mia Thorson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm the BPU Podcast Director.
We want to go ahead and welcome you to our 5th episode of the Bruin Political Union Podcast, and we are calling it Why Can't We Be Friends? Also, welcome back from spring break, Bruins. I know we're all thrilled to be here. So in this episode, we're going to highlight how the increased polarization of politics within the United States between Democrats and Republicans has negatively impacted relationships with friends and family and even significant others due to varying political disagreements. Today, we are very excited to be talking to BPU's own Pierce Monahan, a fourth-year history and political science double major, who is the research specialist for the Bruin Political Union. Thank you, Pierce. And we are also have our wonderful BPU Board Member, Brandon Broukhim, a fourth-year political science, history, and public affairs major at UCLA.
They are not paying me to do that, unfortunately, but maybe they'll be able to use it for their alumni database one day.
Well, I love that. So before we start discussing these different topics with our guests, we first want to highlight the current polarization within the United States regarding political affiliations affecting various relationships. So according to The Atlantic, 39% of United States citizens have political diversity within their families. However, in 2019, 35% of Republicans and 45% of Democrats reported that their family would potentially be discontent if they married someone, for example, from the opposite party. Historically, for example, in 1994, 16% of Democrats and 17% of Republicans viewed the opposing party as very unfavorable. However, this has been exacerbated greatly by 2021. For example, this has increased as 44% of Democrats and 45% of Republicans report having few or no friends from opposing parties, or not because of political ideology and distaste with the other party. And the reason for this rise in polarization is because Republicans, for example, believe that the Democratic Party has been taken over by socialists, and the Democrats believe that racists have taken over the Republican Party. So, for example, Democrats and Republicans tend to view each side as more extreme than in reality they are. In regards to romantic relationships, according to the dating app Bumble, out of the 50 factors that women consider when dating, political beliefs rank 9th in regards to romantic relationships. And 35% have reported that since the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, having the same political ideology in a significant other has been more important in regards to other criteria. And according to OkCupid, over 1.2 million people prefer dating somebody from the shared political ideology and beliefs.
So thank you, Shannon, for those very interesting stats. And before we jump into the general question, I do just want to communicate this to our guests and to our viewers that you guys only need to share what you're comfortable with sharing. This is a safe environment. We're all friends, peers, Bruins. You know what it is. This is a friendly environment. So to start off with introducing our guests and their views on these challenges in the United States, what are the two of your political affiliations, and who in your life do you most immediately think of when we talk about having a difference in alignments? So either one of you, please.
Sure, I can start. So I would generally consider myself conservative leaning. That's just kind of the way that I grew up. Most of my family's income is from small family-owned business. So that's kind of the way I think when in terms of voting and in terms of just in general, policy, economic policy. And as far as divisions go, I mostly think of actually my friends from UCLA. UCLA is a very progressive campus, and I feel in recent years that conservative voices, or at least right-leaning voices, are generally unwelcome among the student body, as far as I've noticed. So that's usually where the political rift comes from.
Yeah, I actually really try not to align with the parties, and the main reason I personally don't is a lot of psychological research shows us that like when you align with a party, or you identify openly, and I have my views and I align with one party more than the other, but at the same time, just like saying I am a Democrat. Um, there's a lot of psychological research showing that you'll just sort of like get onto the bandwagon effect, and you'll sort of like just start supporting every issue, and I think it's really important. I mean, I think parties are useful because they help people who might not have as much time or energy to like identify which issues might be important to them because they can vote party line. But for me, I find it much more interesting and worth my time to really read up about issues individually and come up with my own positions. And so, at least so far in life, I haven't found a need to like uh, come up with a definitive alignment. I think it's very important to remain open and humble in the sense that people's views can change over time, and I think like sometimes today there's like this absolute certainty that what's true today won't be true tomorrow, and I think most of the time that isn't the case. So just keeping an open mind and trying to really evaluate everything on the merits of the moment and sort of like the historical precedents that come along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of valor to what both of you said. And again, I just want to thank you both for your transparency with us, because you guys are what make this interesting, right? It's not just me talking. So Pierce, you did kind of just touch on this a little bit in your answer. And Brandon, I guess for you, I would say, where do you see the biggest rift between the two parties, since you are abstaining from a definitive alignment? And Pierce, you're also welcome to jump in and answer this question again if you would like.
So where do I see the biggest rift? I'd say that. I'd say definitely there's a really big. It goes without saying, like social and cultural issues are sort of like where in the political sphere things can get the most toxic, and people really don't, because these are a lot of those issues are value driven. So a lot of people, they have a certain set of values, and they believe that not only do the people who disagree with them on that issue, like not only are they wrong, but they're actively immoral. They're actively like harming other people or some sacred idea. Not to disrespect or delegitimize that, but it's just a reality. So like especially like in the like, abortion debate, pro-choice versus pro-life people. It's just a fundamentally different like value set, and I recommend people read Jonathan Haidt's book on this, The Righteous Mind, if you have free time. Um, so I'd say the cultural issues, but I'd also say just like there's increasingly a divide between sort of um, at least right now, this sense that there's like a divide between like uh, a populist, um, um, every person type feeling versus sort of quote unquote the elites, and this actually cuts across the parties, but a sense that establishment politics is out, and not only is it out, but often it's very dangerous for one reason or another, and we need to embrace more populist, more um, aggressive measures to deal with the moments of our time. And you see this, I mean, we saw it a lot in the Republican Party the past 4 years, but it's certainly in the Democratic Party too. And the Democratic Party probably has been more effective at organizing against it, but it's in the base and in the party as well.
Yeah, I kind of want to just jump in for a minute and kind of bounce off what Brandon just said. Um, they're increasingly in the last couple of years, especially, the Trump administration, the last 4 years have definitely highlighted this growing rift. I think there's definitely a conflation of moral value, or of moral decisions with political decisions, and I don't think a person's politics dictate a person's morals. And I had the privilege of taking a course with Dr. John Zoller at UCLA. And he had us read that book from Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind. And it really gets into, and again, it kind of touches off of psychology, voter psychology, why people vote the way that they do. And, if people were to vote based solely on moral reasons, I can guarantee a majority of people would probably have voted for Biden. But a lot of people don't think that way. So you have a lot of people looking out for their own self-interests, because that's just, generally people live locally. They think, what's going to benefit me? What's going to benefit my family the next 4 years? So a lot of people vote based on economic lines, what's going to help, what's going to put food on their table, what's going to help them out the most. And so, yeah, you kind of see this rift growing between moral and political decisions. And while it's a simple answer to say that your politics dictate, or your political decisions say something about your morals, I don't think that's always the case, because people do have these different reasons for voting the way that they do. And again, what Brandon said as well, there is this rise of, populism, of demagoguery, that we really need to be diligent in looking out for, because that is increasing in our politics. I mean, look at President Trump, for example. As well, on the Democratic side, I would also go so far as to say someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez kind of falls into this category of demagogue, appealing more to people's emotions as opposed to rational arguments. And I think when you get that kind of environment, or that kind of aspect put into a political environment, it really causes divisions and rifts in society.
Yeah, I think you, Pierce, I think you brought up, kind of an elephant in the room when it comes to talking about divisions, social divisions. I mean, with the last 4 years, I think we would be remiss to not touch on the Trump administration and how that has affected social relationships in terms of politics. And another really good point that I just wanted to bounce off of that you made really quickly is that morality is not the only thing dictating votes. And I think, in my entirely unbiased opinion, and the unbiased opinion of the Bruin Political Union, of course, I think that being in Los Angeles, we are definitely in a bit of a blue, not a bit, we are in a blue bubble, I think. And even for those of us who are left-leaning, it can be it can be kind of myopic. And I think there's a privilege that we have being here in Los Angeles of thinking that all votes are moral, right? We don't have to think about voting for what's best for our family economically for the next 4 years, because we have not yet entered that time in our lives yet, or some of us. So thank you both again for your very well thought out answers, and the book recommendation. I'll definitely be checking that out. So to kind of move into a transition, we find ourselves in an age dominated by social media, where quite a bit of personal information can be found with just 15 or so minutes of investigation. Friends through our social networking apps are curated to the interests we advertise, right? There's Black Lives Matter, links in bios and political affiliations, and everything is very public. It's very easy to find people who you share ideologies with. So now let's kind of get into how the two of you view friendship and making friends in this current political climate. So my general question is, would you say that your friend group is diverse in terms of political ideology? Are they willing to discuss and debate political topics, or is that just like that subject that you kind of put to the side, that you avoid? And again, we're not trying to put you guys on the spot. If your answer is no, my friend group is not diverse, we're not going to call you, bigots or anything, because we're here for a safe discussion. We just want everybody to, have a good time. So again, either one of you can jump in for that question.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think, I really have tried hard to have a politically diverse friend group. I don't think it's easy in the current moment too, because I think a lot of people or even our information sources are so different. And especially one of the things that sort of frustrated me about the last 4 years is that everything like everything that everybody talked about became about politics. So you couldn't like discuss any issue without like somehow like becoming political. Um, and not that I mean I think politics are like really fundamental to life and like and a lot of people's livelihoods and like people's existence, and I respect that. But I do think that there in a healthy political culture you have room for different ideas, you have room for discussion, you have room for just being able to even for like an evening like talk to your friend about non-political things. And that's not to say that politics isn't important, it's just to say that there are other things important in the world besides politics as well. um, and so I mean I'm very proud and happy and feel very lucky that I have a friend group with diverse political leanings. But I don't think it's so common, and I think a lot of people actually might view it as somewhat suspicious. They don't really understand how that's possible. Um, but I really think like it. If anything, it just makes me a better thinker and helps me solidify my own views um, as I go through life.
Yeah, and I'll touch on this as well. My friend group at at UCLA specifically is very diverse. Again, like I said, we can all acknowledge UCLA's student body is pretty progressive, and being history and political science double major, you're often in touch with other history and political science majors as well. And so most of my friend group is actually people of political science as well. And so, politics comes up pretty much all the time. Um, but it's never an issue that divides us. It's more just kind of a conversation starter of, oh, I mean, especially last year's, oh, did you see Trump tweeted that? Or did you see, oh, this happened, whatever. But it's never been a source of division. And I've never seen politics as a reason for not being someone's friend or ending a friendship with someone. Unfortunately, I do kind of have a story that is kind of along those lines. So this was right after the election, probably, I think the first weekend of December. So my roommates and I in our apartment complex, sometimes we have small COVID safe get togethers with our neighbors. And so there was one night, everyone's kind of mingling around, uh, and me and a couple neighbors are standing in a circle, and one of them asks, "Oh, um, what did you guys think about this past election?" And at that point, I should have just excused myself to get a glass of water or something, so I didn't have to be involved in that. And I just responded with, usually I don't enjoy talking politics with friends who aren't, political science. Just, it's divisive, and especially at parties. Like Brandon said, there are way better things that you can talk about, especially in a social gathering. Um, that isn't political. And so, yeah, I just said, I don't normally enjoy talking politics. And one of them said, so that means you either voted for Trump or you didn't vote. And neither of those are a good thing. And I was, that's a pretty damning assessment of the situation, if I might say so myself. Um, and eventually it just led to, and I have to say, I didn't vote for president in 2020. I just couldn't see myself voting either way. And so eventually it came down to, again, this statement of, you know, your political decisions have moral consequences. And unfortunately, about a month later, I tried bringing up with one of my neighbors who was in that conversation. I said, I noticed there was this political division between the two of us for the last month or so. And I just kind of want to, you know, clear that up. Can that just be water under the bridge? And again, that conversation came up about, yes, I'm willing to, but your political decisions have moral consequences. And unfortunately, that has caused this friendship that I once had to kind of decline. And it's actually really sad to see that someone that I was pretty close friends with now on kind of tense terms with after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that anecdote, Pierce. And I think that kind of comes back to what Brandon was bringing up about a healthy political culture, which is kind of what we should be aiming for, right? That should be our long-term goal, because I think, I can say without much contest in this podcast that we are not there yet. There's not a whole lot of, when I think of the current political climate in America, my first thought isn't healthy or welcoming or diverse even. And I really liked, again, what Brandon said about being a better thinker, about how having a diverse friend group will make you a better thinker. And I think, that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? That's what all we can strive for, is to keep learning, because again, everything, including politics, is so fluid. And not to toot our own horn or to advertise to any of the listeners, but the Bruin Political Union itself is a very, very diverse organization. As you can see, we're all members here. There are some differences in opinions, and here we are chatting on the phone like a bunch of old friends. So join the Bruin Political Union. Okay, and to make a transition into family. So friends can be changed and can be lost or gained, but usually family is forever. And that is something that we have seen definitely be tried over the last 4 years. It can also definitely be tough when your views differ from that of your family. So my general question here is, what did you, if you do have a difference in opinion in any of your family, what did you think was the root of your difference in opinions? Was coming to your own conclusions liberating or frustrating? Because I know when some people go to college, they might come home and have some new ideas at Thanksgiving, and maybe like your great Aunt Linda isn't a huge fan. So either one, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of political difference with most of my family members. I have one uncle who's extremely progressive, and the rest of my uncles are fairly conservative. So it's actually interesting to see the kind of Facebook banter that goes on back and forth between them. And it's interesting because they have each other blocked on Facebook, but I know their value systems are exactly the same. So it's really interesting to see how politics have kind of divided family members. As far as I personally go, as far as any political differences, it's really trivial. The root of it's not based on any value system. And I think really what it comes down to is, if you have major political differences in your family, I think the root of that really comes down to, your framework for how you view the world. And that kind of dictates, what you believe, your conceptions about, good versus evil, because I've kind of seen that at play in, political divisions. But as far as, trivial issues go, it really doesn't come down to that. And as far as, was it liberating or frustrating? Oh, I think it's absolutely liberating when you kind of come to your own views. And it's, like I was just saying, as far as when you have this kind of framework for how you view the world, if you can have a coherent, cohesive, you know, paradigm for how you view things, how you view politics, it's really liberating when you aren't constrained by, oh, well, what if my family disagrees? What if my friends disagree? What if so-and-so disagrees with me about this? When you have, and for some people that framework is, religion. For other people, that framework is, the idea of social progress. But once you have that framework for how you view politics and how you view the world, everything starts to fall into place, and you have a more cohesive, grounded view of why you believe something the way that you do. So I think it's absolutely liberating once you get to that conclusion and once you start to kind of think for yourself.
I have to do a little bit on the other way on this. I think one of the tragedies of our political moment is that a lot of families, and I just read an article in the Atlantic about this today. A lot of families are being torn apart by politics. A lot of families can't, like you're saying, me, I can't sit at the Thanksgiving table without wanting to cut each other's necks off rather than the turkey. And it's a real problem, because at the end of the day, like, if our families can't get along in this country, it's very difficult to see how, like, people who don't have close blood ties, who sort of, like, I mean, in the country, you're the people you're in the country with are often just complete strangers that you have to, like, figure out how to get along with. If we can't get along with our own family members, we have, like, some psychological investment in, just naturally, it becomes much more difficult, I think, to get along with, like, all the other people we need to be friends with and care about in our country. And have, like, an investment in, like, their success as much as our own. So I think it's a very troubling trend. I think that it is it would be um, it would be dishonest to ignore that there's definitely something there. Um, and I think that, I mean, even if I haven't experienced it, I mean, I've experienced it at times. Um, Even if maybe I'm not the most representative, um, I still think it's a big issue, and I still think, like, it's something that we need to work on and discuss and address and try to figure out how we can overcome.
Yeah, if I can add real quick onto what Brandon said, I'd like to drop another book recommendation. So over winter break, I had the privilege of reading a book by Republican Senator Ben Sasse, actually a couple of his books, but one of them is called Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. I think it's a fantastic book because whether or not you're progressive, conservative, Democrat, Republican, it really touches on these kind of big social technological issues that we're facing in the 21st century, specifically the decline of the traditional family structure. A lot of people are uprooted by technology, and especially in the COVID era, people working remotely, not really rooted in any specific place. And a lot of what it comes down to, this political division, is the lack of community, lack of family. So we've turned into this, a term that he coins, anti-tribes. So basically, instead of being pro something, you're just against whatever the other side is for. And so once we start kind of building our own communities and rebuilding the family, rebuilding those ties that connected family members to another, that's when we can really start to heal the political divisiveness in our country. And I kind of thought about this. I saw a tweet right before Thanksgiving, and I've seen it for a couple of years in a row, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. But it was something along the lines of like, oh, Thanksgiving's coming up, so now it's time to, you know, call out your racist Uncle Joe at the Thanksgiving dinner table, no mercy. And I kind of thought about this, like, yeah, oh, well, of course, if you believe in something, you should stand up for it. But is it really, the question it comes down to, is it really worth losing a family member or losing that kind of familial tie over politics, over a social issue? Racism is one thing, but climate change, I think, is that really a reason, is something like climate change a reason for losing a relationship with, your uncle or aunt over,
Yeah, I think that's a very that last thing that you said is a very important I guess line to draw in terms of that. Like, racism is definitely one thing and climate change is definitely another thing. Absolutely. Really great answers from both of you. Guys are so well spoken, making my job so easy. So into my next question. If you do have differing political opinions, you both kind of touched on this a little bit. From your family, do you enjoy that sharing of opinions and debate, or is it kind of uncomfortable? How do you personally feel about that when it does arise?
I enjoy it when I feel like everybody is fact oriented and knows what's going on. Also, the one thing about our culture, like, I don't think I think it is possible that people have different interpretations of the same information. And I don't think that that's like something that people can see. Like people think, oh, I have all this data and there must be only be one conclusion from that data. No, you can have data and you can make many different conclusions from the same set of data. And that's not saying like facts don't exist. Of course they exist. That's not saying we're dealing with different like conspiracy theories like we shouldn't engage with. But like you can have one set of facts and have many different conclusions from that set of facts. But that aside, I love it when we can have like discussions on the same like playing field. It is very annoying when that's not the case, and I hope that it's something to really emphasize, because I think sometimes it's easy to forget. Even in ourselves, even in sort of like the sources we read, and make sure we're not falling into groupthink and things like that.
Yeah, I'd agree with Brandon on this. I think it's enjoyable to talk to family members when political issues do arise. As long as, there's that underlying acknowledgement that we're going to maintain a civil kind of environment, and that our political differences aren't going to disrupt any bonds that we have as family members. And so that's really what it comes down to. But yeah, I've never had any discussion with family members that's turned into, blocking another member on Facebook.
Yeah, that might be a generational rift. Honestly, I'm not sure if that would be my first instinct, to be like, oh, that's it, final straw, we're not friends on Facebook anymore. But to each their own. So Pierce, I have a question for you specifically, because you very early on in the podcast kind of mentioned how UCLA is very progressive, how it's a very progressive environment. So would you say that you've been here for 4 years, lucky you got to be a UCLA student before COVID. Would you say that it has changed your political opinions because it's so progressive, or has it made you more strict or more right-leaning?
Well, I want to say first, I've only actually been at UCLA for 2 years. I transferred here. So I've really only got to experience campus for 1 year in person. And I was actually talking to someone recently about this, and being in kind of a definitely a left-leaning environment at UCLA, I don't think it's turned me either farther right, which God, I hope that would never happen. And it did not turn me farther left. It really just opened my eyes to new perspectives, and it really shaped how I view politics, and really kind of, I don't want to say that it made me farther left, because it definitely didn't. But yeah, it showed me new perspectives, and now I can understand, oh, I can see why that person believes that. I can see why that person believes that. But at the end of the day, I still have my framework for how I view politics, how I view the world. And that's pretty constant, not really changing. But again, there are experiences that other people have that I've heard firsthand that I can say, okay, that would be a reason that I could change my viewpoint. And, that's a great perspective for why someone would believe something else.
Yeah, thank you. And again, totally not to put you on the spot at all. Just, genuine curiosity. So into my next transition, my next section, this is a very fun one of my favorites, is romantic relationships. Shannon, I can see you laughing. Some people say that it is important to have a lot in common with your romantic partner. Others kind of like the opportunity for some independence, for some debate. So my question to you guys is, does someone having a difference in opinion from you determine whether or not there will be a continued relationship? Would you still pursue someone on the opposite side of the political spectrum? Because I've definitely, I don't know, I don't want to say everybody, but I'm sure many people have been on first dates where, that one question comes up where it's like, so how do you feel about such and such? And definitely that sets the tone for the rest of the date, if not the rest of the relationship, or lack thereof.
I just want to correct the record though for something. I have been laughing when I'm on mute for most of this interview. So this is not specifically related to this question. I don't want Mia to slander me on the record. Um, what I will say about this, this is actually something I think is really important to think about, because I think like a lot of what people don't want to discuss with polarization, and that is that it's led to not only polarization like of our ideas, but polarization of our geography, polarization within our within our cities and our states. So you'll like people talk about red states and blue states all the time, right? You have literally red neighborhoods and blue neighborhoods, and you have red couples and blue couples politically, um, and and uh, and people who will only date Republicans and people who will only date Democrats. I think the bigger criteria for me is I care. I mean, I don't know. Right, the current moment is very strange, so maybe I don't know if I'd say this for like right now actually, but generally, like where I'd want to get if we had a more healthy politics is that I'm interested. I'm not no. I would consider being interested in somebody who had an open mind and who was not a a uh, a prisoner of their own ideology. I think that's the real litmus test for me. It really would bother me if I'm dating somebody and I feel like I'm dating a cable news channel. I really don't want that vibe. Um, but I mean, it really it depends on the person, and like that. This is the other thing. I don't think the politics is the be all end all. I think there are like 1,000 other things that make somebody a good or bad person. Um, Politics certainly can factor into that, and like certain political views are really can be really damning in this realm. I think, like for example, like on racial issues, I think it's very important to sort of have a more progressive mindset. But um, but beyond sort of like their core values and core issues and like things you stand for, just general like political issues like tax policy. I don't I don't really think that that's the be all end all of a relationship. And for those who do think, I would really strongly urge you to reconsider that, because I think you'll have a much more meaningful relationship if you're not so concerned about every little political checkbox that we have in our system today.
Yeah, I agree with that. Politics are not they're not the end all be all for what I look for in a partner. Um, Quite frankly, to me, politics aren't very important when it comes to picking a partner. What it comes down to is, like Brandon said, core values. And like I've said earlier, that kind of framework for how you view good versus evil. For me, it's religion. For a lot of other people, it is. For other people, it's this idea of social justice, social progress, and that's really what kind of dictates what I look for. And there's obviously like common things that we can all agree on. Racism is bad. You know, that is among things like that, like Brandon said, more progressive mindsets are obviously welcomed. But at the end of the day, yeah, trivial political issues like, oh, what do you think about tax plan? Or what do you think about gun control? What do you think about, you know, and that's not to say that gun control is trivial, but that's just saying it's not crucial to whether or not a relationship uh, will be strong or not. So again, politics are not very important to me when it comes to dating.
Just add one other thing on this. It's funny because today, this is the news of the day. Today, and this will date us, but today the Biden announced his infrastructure plan. A big plan, $2 trillion to build new roads and bridges and fight climate change and all these sorts of things. And I'm just thinking, like, how am I like if I disagree with somebody on like the size of the infrastructure plan or like investments, how much specifically we should invest in fighting climate change immediately, like I just find that would be like a crazy first date conversation. Like, oh God, like this person doesn't agree with me on infrastructure. Like it's not that you gotta have a little perspective. If not, there's so many political issues that you'll sort of like go crazy with it all.
Brandon, I'm a little butthurt. That was my whole script for my next date. So I'm going to have to go ahead and scrap that and come up with an original conversation. But thank you. Thank you both again. And I think, while I totally respect and for the most part agree with what all of you are saying, I think it's important just to express to the listeners that we are not a representative sample. Also, this is, if any of you guys are statisticians, ooh, my mouth forgot how to work for a second, you guys will know that we are not representative of all of UCLA. And I think it's important to not to delegitimize whatever our lovely men are saying, but definitely some girls might have maybe a different idea about some of these answers, just for the sake of conversation. Okay, so moving on into the national level of political polarization. So for some background, some key examples of national political and judicial figures putting their ideological beliefs aside for the development of a friendship would be Supreme Court Justices the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Scalia. So Ginsburg was one of the most left-leaning justices on the court, and Scalia was one of the most conservative. So they both found common ground for their love of opera, not infrastructure plans, both coming from New York City, both served together on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. And here's some really fun quotes that Shannon and our research team pulled for me to share with you guys today about kind of their stance on what we're talking about today. So this is a quote from Scalia. "If you can't disagree ardently with your colleagues about some issues of law and yet personally still be friends, get another job, for Pete's sake." And Ginsburg had mentioned that their political debates strengthened their friendship and could work no matter how polarized its members were. So my question to you both is, should leaders within the Democratic and Republican parties be role models for the general public at establishing friendships and bipartisanship in the United States, or despite political ideologies? Because right now, I'm not sure if we have any really strong role models for kind of purple friendships, if that makes sense, one red, one blue. So either one of you, whenever you're ready.
Well, I think it would be a good start, but it's definitely not it's not the only solution to the problem. So there's this term or concept in psychology, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't know a whole lot about psychology, but I do know this. There's something called modeling behavior theory, and it's in like childhood development. So a child growing up will base his or her behavior based on the behavior of the parents. So if you have two parents that bicker and argue all the time, that is how the child will likely grow up to perceive love, and will likely, repeat those same actions in the future when they grow up, that same behavior, because, well, they see the parents as role models, and, that's what they think is right. And so taking that on a national level, we kind of see the same thing going on. So you have, people look up to politicians as role models. That's beyond dispute. And when you see your role models bickering all the time, that really trickles down, not to quote Ronald Reagan at all, but that trickles down to the general population. And we have this massive political divisiveness, this polarization going on. But I think it's a start. Definitely some element of civility is definitely the way to go. But again, we have a deeper problem in our communities that we need to be, we need to address first. And that's, kind of rebuilding family ties, rebuilding our communities, rebuilding our friendships first. And then we can get along with the other side, on a national level. It really starts with the individual, then the community, the family, friendships, and then it can expand outwards. But if we try to heal from the top down, or from, on a large scale down, I don't think it's going to work.
A very short and quick answer to this question. Yes, we should have better leadership. It's complicated why it probably won't happen.
Thank you. That was illuminating. um, so that pretty much wraps all of my official questions for you today. I just have one kind of concluding farewell question for the both of you, and that would be, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to make friends with someone on the opposite side of the political spectrum, looking to date someone on the opposite side of the political spectrum, or has maybe an especially tough Thanksgiving ahead of them?
Well, I think it really boils down to one key question, and that is, you know, what what are our priorities? Are we more focused on social issues like politics? Oh, I see your comment, Brandon. Um, the main question here is, are we more focused on what's more important to us, our friendships and our relationships with other people, or the political issues that we care about? Because the moment that you start blocking a family member because of political differences, or you start cutting a friend out of your life because of political differences, you're obviously prioritizing politics over your relationships. And so that's really what we need to consider in our own lives, is what's important to us, what are our priorities. And I think building relationships are definitely the priority that we need to be looking out for. But I don't think the issues are mutually exclusive. We can work together in tackling political issues, but we just need to have some common civility and really come together as Americans, in this time of, great political divisiveness, that we can come together and tackle these issues together and be civil and come to a, compromise, or not compromise, collaborate, sorry, collaborate on these issues.
I take a little bit different view on this. I don't think the ideal is a society where people are less passionate about politics, because I think that like it's true that when you have a very engaged citizenry and you have a citizenry that's like connected with the political system, they're gonna have passionate views about the issues they care about. So the issue isn't necessarily like, oh, people feel so strongly, in my opinion. It's that people can feel strongly, but they need to be able to like tolerate people, or at least be willing to listen to people who don't share their view fundamentally, and not view the political tribes that we live within as sort of like, one group are my allies and the other group are my enemies, and we need to decimate them and make sure they never take office ever again. That's not, in our system, that's not possible. um I think that, yeah, it comes down to respect. It comes down to patience and political tolerance. I think it comes down to like being like a well read and like well informed um, person and within our society. Because if you have the time, and not everybody has that privilege, but if you're able to read up on political issues, you'll see other people, you'll learn more about other people's views, and you'll see that like political debates, like often it's not always, but a lot of the time it's not coming out of like a place of malice or a place of like bad intentions, but we just have different views of the world. And I think the job of politics is to like help figure us out, like how we're going to implement those views into policy.
Well, thank you both so much. I think that those were, two a little bit different, but I think um, kind of similarly themed concluding messages from the two of you. And, I had a great time tonight, laughing at my own jokes and listening to your guys' wonderful, very well thought out answers. So I really do want to thank you both, Pierce and Brandon, sincerely from the bottom of my heart. From taking time out of your, what I'm sure is very stressful week one of spring quarter, to come and chat on the podcast. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you for having us on here. I appreciate it.
It's really been a pleasure, and I'm so glad that we're doing this now.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, we thank our guests for coming on to talk about politics and different relationships going on in the United States, especially with the polarization in the United States increasing day by day, honestly. So just to our listeners, if you guys have any suggestions regarding video ideas, what information you would like to see, or a guest to invite to the podcast, you can reach out to the Brewing Political Union at bpu@g.ucla.edu.